On today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies, I am going to do my best to hold it together. I have promised to Michael Cole that I wouldn't cry, but my all-time favorite Grizzly has announced his retirement. Marc Gasol no longer playing basketball. I'm going to hold it together for Marc. It's for Marc. I'm going to do this show in honor of his career. Plus, we're going to talk about Derrick Rose, hopefully getting closer to a return for the Grizzlies, and a preview of tonight's contest with the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Lock in with Damichael and I.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Joe.
Marc Gasol is gone.
I know.
I made it the first 30 seconds.
I got you. I got you, Joe. I got you. Here's some tissue.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's the thought that counts. We're like 1,000 miles away, but
I always got you, buddy.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I meant to just keep that to the cold open, and it went overboard. I messed it up.
I know.
Marc would be so disappointed. Okay. Whew.
Here we go. Breathe in.
All right. Welcome to this Thursday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. My name is Joe Mullinax, joined by my delightful co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. I, when I'm not embarrassing myself on YouTube and podcasts, have been covering the Grizzlies all over the place for a long time. Marc Gasol has been all over the globe, and we're going to talk about that here momentarily here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by PrizePicks. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports is PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Check us out on YouTube. If you missed our episode yesterday, doing a bit of a rundown of a lot of the great topics that our commenters on YouTube, folks on X, asked us to talk about. We'll do some more of those in the future, especially maybe the All-Star break will be a good time to do another kind of mailbag kind of episode to Michael in a few weeks here. So thanks to everybody that interacted with us in that way. Hopefully you enjoyed yesterday's show. Hopefully you're an everydayer at this point. You're subscribed, whether it's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever it may be, checking out podcasts. Hopefully you got Damichael and I with you each and every day here on Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael, obviously we're going to talk about Derrick Rose. We mentioned on yesterday's show we should get more solid injury information coming out of yesterday's practice. That did indeed occur, at least with Derrick Rose. Obviously the Grizzlies have a basketball game tonight, the current Grizzlies. But this is a chance for me, and obviously I was being a bit dramatic a moment ago. But Marc Gasol is 100% my favorite Grizzly of all time. He was at the peak of his powers when I lived in Memphis, Tennessee. I lived there from 2011 to 2014. And I started covering the Grizzlies, obviously, around that time. And watching Marc play, seeing him get recognized for his Defensive Player of the Year. But even beyond that, his work with St. Jude, he very clearly was someone, obviously, with his older brother, Pau, having been with the Grizzlies before that. Of course, the irony of him being involved in the big trade that sent Pau Gasol to the Lakers. Marc was viewed as a throw-in at that time, and he most certainly is not viewed as a throw-in now. He will almost certainly be the second Memphis Grizzly with his jersey retired next to his brother from another mother, as they like to put it, Zach Randolph, when the time comes.
Yeah, a terrific career from Marc Gasol. And he was always fun to watch, as a kid, because when I think of him, it's kind of like a Jokic before Jokic type feel.
Absolutely.
And I remember as a kid, like when I watched basketball, the excitement of the game is what kind of brought me in. The high flying dudes, like you talk about Marc Gasol being your favorite. When I was a kid, I loved Stroh Miles Smith.
Sure.
Like, that was my, like, I want to go to the Pyramid FedEx Forum so I can watch Stroh Miles Smith tear the rim off the goal. Like, that's what excited me. But, and Rudy Gay, of course, right after that. Then, you get older And then you understand, like, this guy, he's getting blocked shots, and he's on his tippy toes,
Right.
and he's making these nice. Before the 3-point shot, he's scoring around the rim, pretty much at will. I mean,
people forget that he did not have that 3-point shot until later in his career.
He didn't, and Marc Gasol was actually in my media career around the Grizzlies. He was my first like wow moment being around the players. I remember I was an intern in 2018 at the Tri-State Defender, and I was in the elevator, and the door opens up, and there's this big gigantic guy, and I'm looking up, and I'm like, that's Marc Gasol. Got to keep it cool in the elevator together. And then we go out the elevator. I just give him, hey, what's up, Mark? And just keep it going. But terrific guy. You mentioned the community work that he did. I always heard great things about that. And he's forever Memphis. Like when you think Grizzlies basketball, the name Marc Gasol will forever be attached to it. He was the grit and grind culture there. He won the defensive player of the year, and he beat out LeBron James. I wonder what you were writing around that time, Joe Mullinax, when he beat out LeBron, and a lot of people were huffing and puffing about that.
Well, I love your Jokic comp because I think obviously Jokic is a better basketball player than Mark. Not trying to do that. The comparison for me is it was Marc Gasol winning an award. You mentioned LeBron James. DeAndre Jordan was doing some pretty impressive things defensively around that time as well. It was one of those first ones where like the numbers backed it up, right? Like you saw how impactful Mark was 12 years ago when he won that defensive player of the year. Watch Marc Gasol play, to your point, there's nothing really physically impressive about him. It was the skill of basketball, and he was really elite defensively. He was the quarterback of that Grizzlies defense. Taylor Jenkins has had some good defenses here, but those peak grit and grind defenses, we're talking about 94 to 89 basketball games. And it wasn't because, the foul rules were roughly the same. It was just elite, physical, hard-nosed defense. And Marc Gasol, obviously Tony Allen was extremely important on the perimeter, but Gasol was the quarterback of those efforts. But my favorite Marc Gasol memory is, and it comes from a sad time in the grit and grind era, but it was a really special moment. It's when Zach Randolph's mother passed away. And it was Zebo's first game back, and Zach grabbed like the game clinching rebound or made a big play, and Mark was there to hug him, and the whole team was there to hug him. And it was just really cool. It's one of the reasons that I'm always so hesitant to talk about this current era and compare it to that, because is watching John Morant do what he does a lot more fun? Absolutely. I think saying that is fair. But for me as a fan that became a pseudo media member, whatever you want to call me, seeing how much those guys genuinely loved Memphis, how much those guys genuinely loved each other. Like it was no BS. It was not fake. I was in those locker rooms back in those days, and you genuinely saw these guys growing up together. They were in each other's weddings. They were around each other's kids when they were born. Like this is something that was bigger than basketball. And that was one of those moments that really stands out in my mind. And I'll never forget it as a basketball fan. Seeing how much they rallied around Zach. Mark genuinely cared for Zach. When Zach retired, Mark came to the retirement ceremony. Mike Conley and Tony Allen will probably have their numbers, not probably, almost certainly, will have their numbers retired as well. I can't wait for the Core 4 statue outside of FedEx Forum. Mark was just a massive piece of that for me. The Grizzlies helped make Memphis home all those years ago, and I really loved watching Marc Gasol play basketball. He had a remarkable career. But again, even bigger than that, it was the authenticity and the organic nature of what grit and grind was that still puts it ahead of anything else for me when it comes to Grizzlies basketball since I've been following it.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, man. The number 33, it's going to be in the rafters very soon. It is something, even in the time that I've been covering the Grizzlies, you've heard, the people around the team say that it's something they've wanted to do. And it's kind of been you're going to wait till Marc Gasol kind of retires from basketball to kind of put it into motion. But I expect it to happen relatively soon. I don't know if it'll be this season. Sounds like it'd be better to do it, early next season, maybe. You get more of the kind of the star power back, which will lead to more fans, and the vibes will just all around be better. And you could kind of plan, I guess, more around it because, Marc Gasol's retirement, you probably want to do it maybe a Timberwolves game, Conley can be there or whatever the case may be. But it's definitely something that is in the works. So going to be cool to see Gasol get on it.
I support the Conley idea 100%. Wherever Mike Conley is when the season starts, the first time they come to FedEx Forum, that needs to be the game. I agree completely. It shouldn't be happening right now. It should be a later 2024 thing and make it a bigger deal. I'm 100% with you on that. One last note on Marc Gasol, and we'll move on. Obviously, Toronto fans that might be checking out this podcast, Marc Gasol got traded to Toronto. That was kind of the first chip to fall in the Grizzlies rebuild. Mike Conley gets traded later that year. I will point out, Toronto fans, Gasol was extremely important to that championship, and you should appreciate him. Guess what he had engraved inside of that championship ring? Grit and grind. Okay, so Marc Gasol, forever Memphis, forever a Grizzly. He is going to be having his number retired at some point. And, of course, as that information comes out, Damichael and I am sure down the road will continue to exchange wonderful memories of watching Marc Gasol in that grit and grind era. It's my personal favorite. I'm biased. Maybe you could share your favorite Marc Gasol memories in the comments. That would be a fantastic way to remember his career with the announcement of his retirement. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, somebody who is not retired yet, Derrick Rose, nearing a return to playing again for the Memphis Grizzlies. Damichael was at practice on Wednesday. He'll give us an update on that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season is coming to a close. Basketball season is still here, but you can still get in on the action over at PrizePicks. You can still do the Specials League, which is a combination across both football and basketball with 2 or more players. For example, you can take Vince Williams Jr., Travis Kelce, 10.5 combo of three-pointers made and receptions going into the big game next week. Maybe you want to do the reboot policy. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half, doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted. Again, that is a PrizePicks special. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, once again, we will be talking Derrick Rose, his upcoming return, and other notes from Damichael Cole at practice. Stick with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, co-hosting with Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal. They're in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. Follow him on X if you don't already do so. Damichael, you've been busy the last couple of days, partner. You've had lots of great pieces over at the Commercial Appeal. I know I probably miss a couple, but I try to retweet as much as I see and as much as I read from Damichael. No disrespect to anybody else out there doing it. Damichael's the best in the business at this point. If you don't follow him on X, you need to make sure you're doing so at Damichael C. If you want to get mad online every once in a while, follow me on X at Joe Mullinax. I'm good for that. Damichael, obviously, we gave Marc Gasol his flowers, my favorite Grizzly of all time. But there are current basketball games being played by the current Memphis Grizzlies. Going into tonight, obviously, they're taking on the Cavs. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Somebody that may not be ready for the Cavaliers game, but should be ready soon, is Derrick Rose. So you were at practice on Wednesday. You saw Coach Ja Morant. I saw your post about that with the his arm in a sling and a whistle in his other hand. Maybe the vibe at practice, how the team's feeling at this time, and then that update on Derrick Rose, because I know several of our listeners and commenters have been asking for a Rose update.
Yeah, because it's been pretty quiet on the Derrick Rose front. Remember when January 2nd when he was hurt. On January 3rd, they played the Spurs, and they played the Raptors, and he was listed as week to week. That was the designation that was given. Everyone else you've seen that's been out, Jake LaRavia, I think it was 3 weeks reevaluation. Desmond Bain, 6 weeks reevaluation. Marcus Smart, 6 weeks. Ja out for the season. His was week to week, and we're closing in on a month, but now we have more clarity there. Talk to Taylor Jenkins after practice on yesterday basically said that Derrick Rose is closing in on a potential return somewhere, as he said, in the next 3 games or so. So maybe not this game. He's listed as doubtful against the Cavs, so very unlikely that he plays in this one. But then you got the Warriors after that. He's probably going to get a chance to play in that one. But if he doesn't return, then it sounds like if all else fails, Derrick Rose will be back on Sunday. So more point guard help for the Grizzlies there. I know a couple people have been asking about couple other guys as well. Luke Kennard is someone that people have been asking about because he was listed as out, in the last couple games. And usually when Grizzlies fans see that, you're waiting on that bigger update to think that it's something more to it. But rest assured, Luke Kennard it looks like he's trending in the right direction. Saw him at practice getting some shots up and whatnot. And he's listed as doubtful for this game. Same kind of beat as Derrick Rose. Sounds like the Friday game against Golden State is more likely for him. And if not that one, then he for sure should be back on Sunday against the Celtics. And then last but not least, everyone's been asking about Desmond Bane, right? This whole idea of him beating the prognosis by double timing it to Michael Cole. And what we can say is everyone with two eyes and one, and you can see it, that Desmond Bane being out of the boot this fast clearly indicates that he is ahead. I mean, it was a grade 3 ankle sprain. So he is ahead of the pace by being out of the boot in such a quick time frame. But I know some people saw, as you alluded to, the picture that I posted on X of John Morant. Some people saw Desmond Bane kind of in a practice uniform in the corner and said, "Oh, was Des practicing?" He was in the picture, but I'd like to just remind people at the time that I posted the picture, that was more of the individual part of practice. So what you're going to see then is guys just getting shots up and basically things that injured guys do all the time, because he wasn't the only one who was there. Brandon Clark was there and dressed at practice as well. Luke Kennard, as I just alluded to, Derrick Rose, all those guys were there and dressed similarly to Desmond Bane. So just want to say a little bit like, yeah, he was at practice, and he's in that process where he's starting to get shots up and things like that, some individual work. But I don't think Desmond Bane has started doing anything like 5-on-5 and ramp-up stuff yet. So we'll see. I'll get more of an update in the next couple of days, and we'll have that there to kind of see how close he is. He's definitely ahead of the pace, but just wanted to kind of clarify that part, too, about the whole was Desmond Bane practicing with the team.
I'm sure we'll talk about the new guys coming up next in our preview of the Cavs game. But since you were at practice, got to take advantage of the beat writer being my co-host here. What are some things that you may have noticed how they were using the 3 new hardship waiver 10-day contract signees? Obviously, Matthew Hurt has a bit of a leg up in terms of knowing scheme, the system between the Hustle and the Grizzlies, the Hustle being the G League affiliate there in South Haven, Mississippi, for those that don't know. Matthew Hurt comes from there. He's familiar with a lot of the terminology, how the Grizzlies do things. Is there an advantage for him there? Do you think the other 2 guys are going to have a chance to play, especially as like Luke Kennard and Derrick Rose, those others start to trickle back into the lineup, or do you think they're there for depth purposes?
Yeah, so that was something I talked to Matt Hurt about as well. Coming from the Hustle, me and you've talked about it on the show. The transition is a little bit easier because the system is very similar. And he said, yeah, it is very similar. There's some small differences, but things like the defensive coverages, he pointed out that those are similar. The offense is very similar. And, he is very self-aware of his game, to say the least. I think one thing that I asked him about, where do you need to improve the most? And he talked about the quickness of the NBA game as compared to the G League game and getting his shot off faster than anyone you saw the game. He's got one of those releases that it takes a little bit of time to get it off.
He didn't mention anything about me calling him molasses, did he?
He did not. He did say that he wanted to have defensive versatility, so maybe he did.
Okay. Well, I'm sure he'll eventually listen to Locked On Grizzly if he hasn't already. Matthew Hurt, if you're listening, I want you to be successful, buddy. Right? I want you to have success. I just call it like I see it. I'd love to see some more lateral movement out on the perimeter. That's all. Yeah,
straight shooter Joe Mullinax right there. But the other 2 guys, so I think the plan, we'll see what happens with Trey Jimson. We can talk about it a little bit more in the next segment because if he's going to play over the course of this stretch, this is the game to get him some action. You're going against one of the not only the biggest front courts in the NBA, but one of the most talented front courts in the NBA. And we've seen the Grizzlies have played better this month, but they've still gotten bullied against certain teams on the glass. And it's not been close against those teams that have the dominant rebounders of the likes of a Jared Allen, like the Cleveland Cavaliers have. So this is going to be the game to see what he brings to the table. They love his physicality. I mean, look, I saw him at practice. This guy's he's 6'10". Like he looks every bit 250, 260. chiseled frame. Like, he's a big dude. It looks like a big country boy. Like he was carrying wood, not weights growing up. Like he's got that look to him. But and then going to Tosin Ewoma, it seems like they want to use him as like a Swiss Army knife. Taylor Jenkins talked about just giving these guys the crash course. And we talked about him being a Swiss Army knife. I mean, that's kind of the way that Taylor Jenkins put it as well. They want him to be a guy who can grab the rebound and push the ball in transition and get other guys involved with the playmaking all in one. So he's got a lot more on his plate probably than the other guys, but that's because of what he brings to the table.
I'm excited to watch him play like we talked about yesterday. He's the one that I'm most excited about. I love Jemison. I think he has a great frame, and he could maybe do some of those substitute Steven Adams things at times, a little bit better than Xavier Tillman. Again, Tillman does a lot of things that Jemison doesn't do well. Otherwise, they would be in different roles. But I do think that it's a good swing on all three of these guys, and it's going to be fun to watch them play. I've seen several people mention that on X. We are at the point in the season where we can watch the team and look for development and see them compete and just kind of enjoy it, right? It's an icing on the cake. If they win, cool, because they're too good to tank. If they lose, cool, because that will improve their lottery positioning where they can get to. It really is kind of a sweet spot of just enjoying the team play basketball again. And after the year that Grizzlies fans have had, that's got to be a welcome of respite, to say the least. And Damichael and I will be previewing that Grizzlies-Cavaliers game. He mentioned the front court for the Cavs. Cleveland getting healthy at just the right time, trying to make a push in the Eastern Conference. We'll talk about that and more next, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to make sure that I am shouting out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel over on YouTube, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On like Damichael and myself, plus the national shows for us that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Oh, Damichael, I know you know this, but it is Super Bowl time. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat in the house, which is in your own house, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a big win or two or three. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers can join today, and you will get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're closing out this episode talking Grizzlies Cavs. Stick with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole, the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication, and I'm so grateful to have him with me almost every day. But one of the two of us, or both of us together, each and every time an episode drops on Locked On Grizzlies on our feeds, in YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Hopefully you're an everydayer at this point and you're checking us out. We paid tribute to Marc Gasol on his retirement earlier in the show, to Michael, and we also gave updates on Derrick Rose, Desmond Bane, and others after practice on Wednesday. It's good that the Grizzlies got a practice in because they got 3 new dudes on the team, and one of the best teams in the NBA is in town. You've got the Cleveland Cavaliers. Again, I think we talked about on a recent episode, Cleveland has not had as bad of injury issues as the Grizzlies, but it hasn't been great for them, right? Darius Garland has been out. Evan Mobley has been out for a sizable amount of time. Ironically, that's led to Donovan Mitchell and especially Jared Allen playing some of the best basketball of their careers. Cleveland also has some pretty impressive role players currently performing well for them. So the Grizzlies go into a stretch here. You mentioned how they have the Warriors and the Celtics. You know, not the easiest run here for Memphis over the next few games. Cleveland, it might be, they're probably tougher than Golden State. Again, Boston's on the list, so that is probably the toughest of them all. But we can't put our nose up at JB Bickerstaff and the Cavs by any stretch of the imagination. This team's pretty good, and they're coming into their own.
Yeah, and here's the thing with this team to me. I tend to say some off-the-wall things sometimes, but I think it's in good merit, and this is one of those things. So with this team, Joe, the guys that have played a lot lately, Donovan Mitchell, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, Max Strus. Like, I feel like they found a rhythm through those guys playing a lot lately. But the point that I'm making is Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, it works, but there are reasons, like we've seen one or the other mentioned in trade rumors at times. And same thing with the front court, even more so with the front court. Jared Allen has been really good. I mean, he's kind of played himself off of the trade rumors. He's been one of the most dominant rebounders in the NBA while Evan Mobley's been out. When he and Evan Mobley were paired together, if you looked at the Cavaliers' net rating numbers, when Evan Mobley was on the court without Jared Allen, the team was better. When Jared Allen was on the floor without Evan Mobley, the team was better. When they were on the floor together, the numbers were a little bit worse. So it's one of those cases, in my opinion, where it's a lot of talent, but the puzzles, you got some square pieces, you got some circle pieces, you got some triangular pieces, and they all just don't quite fit on the puzzle together.
Right.
Extremely talented team. And defensively, with those guys on the floor, they're going to get after you. It's the offense where it gets a little muffled up sometimes because Donovan Mitchell's been so great on the ball, right? But Darius Garland is also great on the ball. We know Evan Mobley is not a super good, floor spacer at this point of his career. That's not the strength of his game. So he and Jared Allen in the paint, it gets a little clunky at times right now. That's where I am on this team. Basically, as it pertains to this game, they have the talent advantage. Defensively, they're probably going to, Jaren Jackson Jr. is your best weapon for the Grizzlies, and this could be a game, we'll see, but on paper, this is a game where he could struggle because he's going to get downhill, and we know he doesn't get a lot of elevation when he drives to the basket. He's mainly finesse, power, strength, left to right, and the Cavs have a lot of length. So we'll see how that matchup works out. But this is one where the Cavs have the defensive advantage, and they can kind of stifle the Grizzlies to the point where their offensive struggles won't matter as much. But if the Grizzlies can score against this team, don't be surprised.
Transitive property doesn't always apply to sports, right? But let's a common opponent in the last 5 games. The Grizzlies played the Orlando Magic. That's the last game the Grizzlies won, 107-106, right? Tough, hard-fought, competitive victory. They are in FedEx Forum. When the Cavaliers played them a couple of days prior, 4 days prior to be exact, Cleveland beat Orlando by 27. The Milwaukee Bucks, one of the best teams in the NBA, right? They just had a twofer against the Bucks. They lost one game to Milwaukee. They also beat Milwaukee 112-100. I think that was the game that spoiled or was close to spoiling the news of Doc Rivers becoming their head coach. Then in their most recent game, going into the Grizzlies game, they had the Los Angeles Clippers, and they beat the Clippers, one of the hottest teams in the NBA, by 10. So this is a team in Cleveland that is a good basketball team. They're very strong defensively. Again, old friend of the Grizzlies talking about the grit and grind era. JB Bickerstaff witnessed the end of it here in Memphis. He's doing a phenomenal job. I always thought that he was worth taking another shot on as a head coach. It just didn't work out in Memphis, and he's doing exactly what you would think he could do there with the talent in Cleveland. It's pretty impressive to watch Karis LeVert and the work that he's putting in. Isaac Okoro is one of the better defenders on the wing in the NBA. He doesn't get a ton of shine, but there's just so much depth to what they're capable of doing, and they have so many different ways to attack you, both in the paint and on the perimeter. They're a dangerous squad, not just for Memphis, but in the NBA at large. How do you see the Grizzlies winning this game? Who has to really have a strong showing? Jaren Jackson Jr. is an obvious answer, but who else can kind of rise up, given what the Cavs are good at, to give Jaren some help?
Well, before I say a player's name, the schedule. The schedule is the quick, easy answer. The Grizzlies are coming off 2 days off, and the Cavs. I said the Clippers. The Cavs are on the second night of a back-to-back, and that Pistons game. You thought, they just blow past the Pistons, rest the guys a little bit. No, the Pistons were winning that game in the fourth quarter, and they gave the Cavs all they could handle. So it could be a case of some tired legs a little bit. We'll see how does the Evan Mobley situation work out. This is his first back-to-back since he's been back. Do they give him the night off? in this game, potentially, or whatnot. So I think all of that will factor in as well. It sounds like Darius Garland is listed as questionable. So we'll see, if same case for him. Does he play in this game as well? So I think those are some question marks that you have to get past. But Vince Williams, and it's the easy answer, Joe. I know, but Vince Williams being back in the lineup, I can't help for avoid it. And you know why? Donovan Mitchell, there's no player he hates in the NBA more than Dillon Brooks. We saw it up close. We saw it last season when they were scrapping on the sideline. We saw it in the playoffs between the Utah and we saw how Donovan Mitchell. He said he's been giving it to Dillon for years, and Dillon had some things to say about him as well. But guess what? Dillon Brooks isn't here anymore. Somebody's got to become that guy that's going to get under his skin. Maybe not to the point where you're scrapping on the sideline, but to get him off his game a little bit. And Vince Williams, you're up. So really going to be looking forward to seeing how he embraces that matchup.
You make a fair point with Detroit. The reason I didn't bring up Detroit is because Detroit's really bad at basketball. If you were going to have a back-to-back, Detroit would be the good first leg of it. Am I right? But you're exactly right. Mitchell had 45 points against the Pistons, 8 assists, 6 rebounds, but he played 35 minutes. So him going into the second night of a back-to-back, maybe some tired legs. You only saw about 20 minutes for both Mobley and Garland in this game. Yeah. You mentioned them being questionable. Jared Allen had another strong showing. Again, they find contributions from all sorts of guys. Old friend, if I do recall, Sam Merrill, being in the mix with Cleveland and having some success, made 3 threes off the bench for the Cavaliers against the Pistons. So this is a deep Cleveland team that can certainly pose issues for a Grizzlies team that are most certainly not deep at this stage due to all the injuries. But it's going to be a fun game. I do think Memphis being fresh is going to help them keep it close. And as long as it's close in the fourth quarter, like we were talking about a little while ago, this isn't Marc Gasol's grit and grind Grizzlies, right? We're not in a position where we need to really worry ourselves with wins and losses anymore, at least not in my opinion. I want them to win, don't get me wrong, but a loss isn't the end of the world. You want to see them compete, a good game. You want to see some young players do some good things, and that's what I'm going to be looking for going into the contest. And that's also something that Damichael and I will talk about on the next episode of Locked On Grizzlies, obviously breaking down Grizzlies Cav from every angle possible, maybe some more injury updates, whatever the case might be, seeing what guys do in pregame. Going into the weekend, Damichael will also preview, you mentioned a pretty busy stretch coming up for Memphis. Obviously that Warriors game, because of rivalry stuff, looms large.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that one plays out because guess what? I think the Grizzlies kind of caught them off guard in that last game. But now, Draymond's been back for a while and he remembers what Gigi said and he mentioned it in the podcast. And, in the podcast, you're going to make it sound all lovey-dovey. But I feel like Golden State's going to come out and say, hey, we're not about to play with these young dudes. And they're going to try to bring it to the Grizzlies early. Like, they're going to come out in the first quarter with a fourth quarter mentality. So I want to see how the Grizzlies kind of respond to that because as I mentioned last time, Ja Morant told the young guys, like he told Jacob Gilliard, he was telling those guys, like, hey, this is when I really want y'all to win. And they came through for him. So I feel like the energy is going to be the same again.
I think the energy is going to be there. It's going to be a fun weekend of basketball for the Grizzlies. It's going to be a fun weekend for us getting the chance to watch that all play out over the next few days. And we'll talk more about that on our Friday edition of the podcast. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available all of those places through the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Local experts like Damichael and myself from Locked On shows, plus the national shows that cover every league. Again, Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Thank you guys for being with us on this episode of the show. Thank you for continuing to share and subscribe and make us a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption. We hope we get the chance to do so again the next time we drop an episode on Friday. Until then, for Damichael, I'm Joe. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. This is Locked On Grizzlies. We appreciate you. Have a good one. We'll catch you next time here on Locked On Grizzlies.